Got slapped with a $200 fine the same morning I found Martha's old ribbon in the coffee tin. Name's Howard Kinney, 67, retired janitor, mostly quiet. The shed creaked in the wind, smelled of cedar and dust, while the HOA lights blinked like search beacons. That violet ribbon? It's tied to a chair by the window, where she used to hum Patsy Cline. What do you do when a rulebook tries to erase someone you loved? Howard adjusted the latch on his shed's creaky door, unaware the small act would soon echo across the county. The latch stuck slightly, hadn't done that before. He gave it a gentle nudge, metal brushing metal with a tired sigh. Overhead, the pine trees rustled in the morning breeze, a whisper not unlike the one that stirred the day Martha chose this spot for the shed. That day had been warm, but breezy. She had smiled at the sun through the branches and said, "Right here, Howard. It'll be our quiet little corner." Years later, it was still her corner. Or his way of holding on to it. Tucker's Diner sat 2 blocks from Howard's house, and if you got there before the 8 a.m. rush, the coffee was hot, the eggs not overcooked, and you could still snag the booth beneath the photo of the 1965 Veterans Reunion. That was Howard's booth, and the staff didn't fight him on it. This morning, the air smelled of fried bacon and old carpet shampoo, pleasant, in a strange way. "Morning, Howie," came Denby's voice, sliding in opposite him with the grace of a rusty tractor seat. "Morning," Howard muttered, folding the newspaper. "Still cold out?" "Colder than your ex-boss's handshake," Denby said. "You still fussin' with that shed?" Howard sipped his coffee. "It's not fussin'. Just needs some patching up. Got a stack of old barnwood from the millers. Real solid." Denby arched a brow. "HOA see it yet?" Howard paused. "Not sure. Haven't heard a peep." Denby chuckled low. "Give it a day." After breakfast, and 2 free refills later, Howard walked the slow, familiar path back home. Leaves crunched underfoot, scattering amber and gold across the sidewalks of Fulton Ridge. It was late October, and the town was bracing for frost, Halloween, and the first quiet stirrings of winter. The shed stood tucked behind the pine grove. Modest. Weathered. And full of memory. He called it Martha's quiet spot because that's what it had always been, a place for gardening gloves, hummingbirds, and the scent of wood polish she'd preferred. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old cedar. Howard brushed off a layer of pine needles from the small window, then knelt by the cassette player on the shelf. It clicked gently, and Martha's voice came through, clear as the first time he'd taped her singing. "You are my sunshine," she hummed. Her voice cracked on the high notes, but she never minded. As the tape played, he hammered in a few replacement shingles along the roofline. His joints protested, but the rhythm calmed him. Hammer, pause. Breath, sigh. Memory, breath again. By the time the sun edged over the neighbor's fence, a white envelope lay tucked against the front door. No postage. Just the HOA seal. Black ink, serious font. Howard tore it open slowly. His fingers moved as if they already knew what waited inside. Dear Mr. Kinney. It has come to the attention of the Fulton Ridge Homeowners Association that unauthorized structural modifications are being made to a pre-existing structure on your property without prior application or board review. He stopped reading there. Unauthorized, he muttered. His eyes dropped to the bottom. The fine, $75, plus review fees. For fixing up his wife's old shed. Howard stared at the letter. A fine? For repairing his shed? He walked outside, eyes narrowing at the HOA security cam perched on the lamppost. The HOA notice was yellow this time, with red ink. That couldn't be good. Howard plucked it from the mailbox like it might bite. The wind had flipped one corner over, slapping the envelope like a warning. He turned it in his hands slowly, noting the return address printed in aggressive all caps, Fulton Ridge HOA Enforcement Office. The kind of mail that never brought news about potlucks or neighborhood festivals. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he walked back through the crisp October air, the sound of dry leaves skittering along the pavement like mischievous children. Halloween was around the corner, and porches along his street had sprouted plastic skeletons and orange string lights. The neighbor across the road had propped a scarecrow wearing sunglasses next to their jack-o'-lantern. Howard cracked a smile. Martha would have hung dried corn bundles by now, and probably dressed the shed in flannel and fake cobwebs. She always said fall decorations gave the house a little wiggle of joy. But not everyone appreciated such joy. Years ago, when Martha planted wildflowers beneath the mailbox, Dolores Martin had paused during one of her HOA walks and sniffed like someone had opened a tuna can in a cathedral. Unsanctioned landscaping, she had declared. Howard tore open the yellow notice on the porch steps. Violation, non-standard window panes on detached structures. Fine, $90. Window panes, he muttered. He hadn't replaced them, just scrubbed them clean last week with vinegar and a little elbow grease. Denby appeared at the gate, wearing a mismatched flannel jacket and holding 2 takeaway cups. Figured you'd need the strong stuff, he said, offering one. Howard took it, still staring at the letter. Now it's the windows. Denby leaned in. What next? Rust-colored grass. Bet she finds the birds for singing too loud. They sat beneath the pine trees, watching the wind tease loose another layer of golden leaves. Denby sipped his coffee. You ever think about going around her? Not HOA board. Someone who doesn't wear pearls to mow their lawn. Howard raised a brow. Like who? A priest? A reporter? A county guy? Someone who doesn't live with their head in a rulebook. That afternoon, back at Tucker's, the cranberry pie was nearly gone by the time Jenny Ward arrived. She had that air of curiosity that followed her like a well-worn notepad. Mid-30s, cardigan over a faded IU shirt, sharp eyes, soft smile. Mr. Kinney, she asked. Howard. Denby told me about your shed. Howard grimaced. It's barely a shed. More of a memory in wooden form. Jenny sat down across from him. Mind if I ask a few questions? I've been looking into HOA complaints, some patterns lately. Yours stood out. Howard chuckled softly. Didn't think I'd ever be the face of rebellion. She laughed. Well, rebellions have to start somewhere. Over 2 cups of coffee and half a slice of the last cranberry pie, try it while it's still warm, Jenny had said. They discussed the letters, the fines, the sudden frequency. She took notes, asked thoughtful questions, and nodded often. I'd like you to meet someone, she said, closing her notebook. Liam Barrett. County records. New guy. Smart. Honest. He's been helping me dig into some HOA filings. The meeting took place the next day at the public library. Liam was in his early 30s, wore glasses with smudged lenses and a tie that looked like it had seen better decades. Pleasure, Mr. Kinney, he said. I pulled the Fulton Ridge HOA charter last week. Noticed something odd. Howard waited, unsure. Repairs under $500. They don't need pre-approval. It's written right in the 2006 charter. Jenny nodded. And yet Dolores has been issuing fines left and right, for everything from loose hinges to mailbox flags. Howard blinked. You're telling me all this isn't even against the rules? Liam frowned. No. But the way it's enforced? That's another story. They left the library as the sun dipped behind the water tower. Howard drove home slowly, gravel crackling under his tires. When he pulled into his driveway, the headlights caught something strange. Dolores Martin's car. Parked halfway on his lawn. And there she was, clipboard in hand, snapping photos across the yard like she was surveying a crime scene. Dolores parks across Howard's yard, snapping photos with a clipboard in hand. Howard didn't expect to see Audra West again, especially not in a county SUV with an official seal. He stood frozen on the porch, a paintbrush still dripping in his hand. The vehicle idled at the curb for a moment, then rolled up his gravel path like a memory he wasn't sure he was ready for. The seal on the door read, County Code Enforcement, but the woman stepping out wasn't just an agent of red tape, She was the girl who used to sneak peach jam into Martha's picnic basket, who danced barefoot on the Kinney lawn during the bicentennial. Audra West. Her dark braid was shorter now, flecked with silver. But the way she squared her shoulders before walking up the steps was the same. Howard Kinney, she said, a slight smile lifting one corner of her mouth. He blinked. You're working code enforcement. Since 22. Budget cuts in parks. She looked around, gaze lingering on the pine trees. Didn't expect my first visit here to be official. The shed lamp flicked on behind him as she said it, motion sensor triggered by the breeze. Howard scowled. Let me guess, light pollution. Audra's brows lifted. How'd you know? He sighed and motioned to the citation already taped to the door. Dolores dropped it off herself this morning. Third one this week. They stood in silence for a beat. Audra looked toward the shed, its clean roof catching the low morning sun. It looks good, Howard. Martha would be proud. He nodded, throat suddenly tight. Earlier that day, Jenny had stopped by with her recorder. She'd wanted a real sense of the place, so they'd sat inside the shed, dust motes swirling like ghosts of old conversations. The workbench was still arranged Martha's way, pliers facing north, jars of screws sorted by size, labels handwritten in careful print. Did she always keep it this tidy? Jenny asked, eyeing the rows of clamps and paintbrushes. She said cluttered tools meant a cluttered mind. He paused. She was usually right. Jenny smiled. Mind if I record? The interview had been gentle, Jenny asking questions about the fines, the shed, the way Dolores operated. Howard's answers had been measured, but truthful. This place was meant for quiet, he'd said. Now every pine needle feels like it's being watched. Back on the porch, Audra handed him a form. Anonymous complaint, she explained. But I checked the logs before coming. Something's off. Howard tilted his head. There've been dozens of complaints against your property, she continued, but they don't all come from residents. Some are just initials. Or blank fields entirely. He glanced toward the lamppost camera. She's logging her own. Audra didn't answer. She didn't have to. Across the street, Denby appeared with a steaming mug and a new bumper sticker in his hand. Thought this might lighten the mood, he called out. The sticker read, My shed, my rules. Howard chuckled despite himself. Audra took a photo of the citation on the door, then turned back. I'm going to dig deeper, but you should know, Dolores is still technically within the HOA bylaws. Barely. Howard nodded slowly. Barely's been her specialty since Martha's wildflowers. Audra smiled faintly. I'll be in touch. That night, Jenny's phone rang just after 9 p.m. She nearly ignored it, numbers with no ID usually meant robocalls. But something nudged her thumb toward the green button. Ms. Ward, a low voice asked. You've been writing about Fulton Ridge? Jenny straightened. Yes. Who's calling? I can't say. Not yet. But I have information about how fines are issued. Dolores, she's not working alone. Jenny receives a call, someone wants to speak anonymously about HOA's misuse of fines. Audra's voice was calm, but her words burned, the county never approved that clause. She looked up from the county file she'd pulled, her brow furrowed beneath her reading glasses. The room at the community center was hushed except for the buzz of a heater and the occasional clatter from folding chairs being arranged for the veterans' breakfast. Howard sat back in his seat, letting the sentence settle. So it's not legal? No, Audra said firmly. That escalating fines clause? It was inserted 4 years ago. Slipped in during a charter update Dolores filed without state review. Jenny let out a slow whistle. She added her own rulebook. Liam turned the scanned charter page toward them, highlighting a section typed in a slightly different font than the surrounding text. The charcoal clause, he said, tapping the header. That's what they called it internally. Sounds like a barbecue regulation, but it's basically a blank check. Why charcoal? Howard asked. Liam grinned. Because it burns through your wallet, apparently. A cold breeze rattled the window. Outside, the first frost had settled in a thin crust across Howard's shed roof, sparkling faintly under the parking lot lights. Inside, the team leaned over the long community table like conspirators in a small-town heist film, only this wasn't fiction. Then we fight back, Howard said quietly. Jenny raised a brow. With what? Lawyers? Howard smiled. With paper. By lunchtime, the shed had become a gallery of grievances. Howard had printed every violation letter he'd received, 32 in total, and laminated them. They were affixed in neat rows across the shed's outer wall, each one with relevant legal codes highlighted in neon yellow. Denby stopped by mid-afternoon, squinting at the display. You turning the place into a courthouse? He asked. Just making the HOA's work public, Howard replied, nailing up the latest one about unauthorized window trim. Jenny arrived shortly after with a folder full of interviews. I just spoke to a woman 2 streets over. Got fined for wind chimes, said it violated auditory uniformity. She shook her head. She thought it was just her. It never is, Audra murmured. Inside the community center, the veterans' breakfast was already underway. The smell of instant eggs and coffee filled the air. Howard helped a retired Marine in a wheelchair get to his table before joining Jenny and Audra near the bulletin board, which was cluttered with HOA flyers and passive-aggressive reminders about bin placement. Across the room, Dolores appeared, heels sharp against the linoleum. Her lipstick matched the red ink she loved so much. What is this circus? She snapped, pointing toward Howard. Posting violations like art pieces? You're inciting defiance. Howard didn't flinch. Just showing folks what's been happening. You're undermining community harmony, she hissed. I'm documenting it, he replied, tone level. The room had gone still. Forks paused mid-air. Denby, halfway through a soggy pancake, stood and cleared his throat. He tapped his cane against the linoleum once for silence. Dolores, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, is it true the shed's foundation predates the HOA itself? Denby publicly asks Dolores, is it true the shed's foundation predates the HOA itself? Don't use my name, the voice trembled on the phone. But I saw the ledger. Jenny pressed her finger to her other ear, hunching in the narrow aisle between dusty stacks at the local library. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Her laptop lay open on a rolling cart, forgotten. Where are you? She whispered. I'll be behind the church. The one off County Road 9. Thursday night. After 7. And then the line went dead. By the time Thursday rolled around, the air had turned bitter. Howard stood on his back porch as dusk settled, eyes fixed on the shed. A faint chime rang from its corner, silver spirals gifted years ago by Martha's sister, catching the breeze like a memory. He rubbed his hands together and turned back inside. On the kitchen table lay a new letter. Violation, auditory nuisance. Subject, unauthorized wind chimes. Fine, $175. Enforcement level, Tier 2. He blinked. Tier 2. Was there a tier system now? Denby called not long after. They got me for porch clutter. Said my gnome army is a threat to neighborhood harmony. Howard snorted. They always looked pretty united to me. That evening, Jenny waited in the shadow of the church's faded stucco wall, the stained glass windows glowing from inside. The basement buzzed with a low crowd murmuring frustrations about fines, letters, and HOA meetings that no one ever recalled being invited to. She spotted him at the corner of the lot. Middle-aged, cap pulled low, collar high. He handed her a folded sheet of paper, ledger pages, grainy but legible. I used to do data entry for the board. I shouldn't be talking to you. His eyes darted toward the road. There are 2 ledgers. The public one's clean. The real one, well, it's got a lot of ghosts. Jenny unfolded the photocopy. The figures didn't add up. Deposits marked as consulting expenses, dates not aligning with meeting logs. She glanced up, but the man had already disappeared into the dark. At the same time, Audra sat across from an old colleague in a dim booth at a 24-hour diner off Route 41. A former state compliance officer, he scanned the files she'd brought and gave a low whistle. If these expenses weren't approved by a state-registered accountant, this HOA could be in hot water. Audra nodded. Can you trigger an audit? I'll see what I can do. Back in town, Liam's sleuthing paid off. Buried deep in the digital filings, he found repeated payouts to a Sycamore Consulting LLC. The address led to an empty lot next to a car wash. It doesn't exist, he told Jenny, wide-eyed. They gathered at Howard's place that evening. Jenny spread the photocopies across his kitchen table. Liam added a printout of the phony LLC registration. Audra updated them on the audit request. Denby arrived last, carrying a plastic tub of cookies and a printed copy of his HOA violation notice, complete with a black-and-white photo of a lawn gnome. They read in silence, the wind chimes tinkling just beyond the door. Then the knock came. A teenage boy, flushed and out of breath, stood outside with a printout. My mom said to give this to you, Mr. Kinney. It was just posted online. Howard read aloud, special HOA meeting called. Agenda Item 1, Emergency Vote on Suspension of Structure, Unauthorized Backyard Shed. Dolores calls for an emergency vote to suspend Howard's shed indefinitely. The HOA meeting was standing room only, and the motion read like a court summons. The high school gym buzzed with tension, the echo of folding chairs scraping on polished floor tiles filling the space as neighbors filtered in. Cold wind swept through the cracked side door, bringing with it the bite of early winter and a scattering of damp leaves. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows along the bleachers. At the front, a squeaky microphone let out a feedback screech before settling into a low hum. Dolores Martin stood at the folding table like a stern principal addressing a room full of misbehaving students. Her blazer looked freshly pressed, but her posture betrayed strain. In her hand, a typed motion on crisp paper trembled slightly as she read aloud. Motion 7B. The structure known as Howard Kinney's Backyard Shed has been deemed in violation of Section 3.4 of the Fulton Ridge Covenant, citing disharmony, visual clutter, and unauthorized emotional significance. A murmur rippled through the room. Jenny, seated with Liam and Audra halfway up the bleachers, handed stacks of papers down each row. Each packet bore a title in bold, Audit Discrepancies in Fulton Ridge HOA Ledger, Preliminary Findings. Howard stood near the back, a small wooden model of the shed under his arm, crafted by Jenny from popsicle sticks for her article draft. Draped over it was Martha's scarf, soft and faded, knotted at the ends where she used to tie it behind her neck on chilly days. Dolores continued, the HOA recommends indefinite suspension of said structure pending review by the Architectural Compliance Subcommittee, to be formed following tonight's vote. Another screech from the mic interrupted her words. She smacked the receiver. It popped, then crackled again. Audra stepped forward. May I speak? Dolores hesitated. You're not a resident. I'm a county code enforcement officer, Audra replied calmly. And under Indiana Statute 32-25-5, any HOA operating with unapproved charter amendments is liable for audit and restitution. The clause you're invoking here, the charcoal clause, was never legally recorded with the state. A hush fell. Even the rustling stopped. Jenny raised her voice. Pages 4 and 5 show disbursements to a consulting firm that doesn't exist. We've verified it. We're not here to shout, we're here to ask why. Liam added, if you've nothing to hide, Dolores, why block residents from seeing the full ledger? Dolores flushed. This is not a courtroom. This is a community. And I won't be interrogated. That's rich, Denby muttered from the front row. Coming from someone who fined me for patriotic gnomes. A light laugh broke out, but only briefly. One by one, hands raised. An elderly woman with silver curls stood, voice quivering. I thought I was the only one. They fined me for my birdbath. I paid without questioning. I feel foolish now. A younger man, tattoos peeking from under his flannel sleeves, spoke next. I've lived here 3 years. Never went to a meeting. I just assumed the rules made sense. This doesn't. Dolores's shoulders tensed. She turned toward Howard. Do you have anything to say? Howard walked slowly to the mic. It squealed again, then stuttered silent. He waited. Someone unplugged and replugged it. A faint buzz resumed. He cleared his throat. I built that shed the winter after Martha passed. No rules ever going to erase that. No applause. Just silence, and something heavier. Recognition. Dolores stared at him for a long beat. Then, without a word, she snapped her folders shut, stepped away from the mic, and left the table. Her heels echoed down the length of the gym as she stormed out, leaving her gavel behind. Audra held up the document. This is the original charter. And it was never amended legally. The county records room smelled of old paper and lemon floor wax. Shelves towered with dusty binders and microfilm reels. Audra stood beneath a flickering ceiling bulb, holding the document like a relic pulled from the earth. Behind her, Jenny and Liam leaned in. The signature page is missing the registrar's seal, Audra continued, pointing. And these so-called amendments? Different font, unnotarized. It's not just sloppy, it's fake. Liam let out a slow whistle. So the charcoal clause, the escalating fines, all of it, null. Every last bit, Audra nodded. They've been operating on bad paper for 4 years. Jenny already had her phone out, snapping high-res pictures. This goes in the article, front and center. By mid-afternoon, the timeline Jenny assembled had been pinned to church bulletin boards, slid under front doors, and handed out at the gas station. She titled it simply, What You Were Never Told, the HOA Timeline. Neatly listed were violations, fines, mismatched ledger entries, and unauthorized rule changes, all mapped to dates and names. At Howard's shed, neighbors began arriving as the sun dipped low. Someone brought lemon bars. Someone else, hot cider. Denby handed out paper napkins and made offhand jokes about starting a new HOA called Humans Over Audits. But the mood was changing. Less humor, more clarity. People spoke in low tones, about fines they paid without question, gardens they'd torn up to comply, plans they'd scrapped. For the first time, it wasn't just about Howard. It was about them all. Howard stood near the shed's door, where the yellow violation notice had once hung. Now, in its place, a small wooden plaque gleamed in the afternoon light, Martha's Shed, 2004. Letters hand-carved, sanded smooth. Meanwhile, across town, Dolores peered through the blinds of her bay window. Her mailbox now wore 3 layers of paint, hastily brushed in wide strokes, first white, then beige, now slate blue. She'd covered the street numbers too. Legal service can't be delivered if they can't identify you, she muttered, pacing. On the coffee table lay the latest church handout, Jenny's article circled in red ink. Her fingers twitched near the gavel, which had returned to her desk with a faint scuff across the handle. Mr. Glass stood outside her door. When she finally opened it, he handed her a folder. I'm resigning, he said, voice flat. The others are too. Audra's filing for an injunction. You'll be alone up there. You're overreacting, she snapped, eyes darting. No, he said. I'm just reading the charter. And he left. By early evening, the county clerk had logged the motion. Audra filed the paperwork in person, an emergency injunction against the Fulton Ridge HOA. Effective immediately, all enforcement, fines, and meetings were frozen pending a full legal review. Howard heard the news while sipping coffee at the diner. The waitress refilled his mug before he could ask. Outside, kids in puffy coats bounced in the twilight. The old jukebox played Patsy Cline's Crazy on low volume. Jenny slid into the booth. We did it, she said simply. Howard nodded once. Now we wait. Back on Dolores's street, the wind picked up. Her porch light blinked erratically. No one answered the door. No car in the driveway. The house sat silent, curtain pulled halfway, gavel gone from the sill. Dolores disappears, her house empty, gavel gone, porch light blinking in the cold. The shed door creaked open. Inside, a chair sat by the window, Martha's violet ribbon tied to it. Howard stood just outside the doorway, snow crunching underfoot. The ribbon fluttered slightly in the breeze coming through a small gap in the windowpane, the one he'd never quite sealed but had come to accept. Light poured in soft and gold. The ribbon, once tucked away in an old coffee tin, now sat in full view, part of the place, part of the story. It was the first week of December, and the town hall parking lot was full. Inside, folding chairs creaked and boots thumped as neighbors filed in. The charter vote wasn't a formality, it was a reckoning. People raised hands, voices, and questions. Liam read aloud the proposed motion: revoke the HOA charter, freeze all fines, and form a temporary committee to review community ordinances with county guidance. When the vote passed, unanimous except for 2 abstentions, a cheer rose that shook the rafters. Denby, dressed in a plaid flannel and a tie featuring Christmas light bulbs, stood by the punch table handing out flyers. Friendly Yard Awards, the heading read. No fines. Just smiles. And pie if we like your mailbox. Jenny was already outlining the first issue of the new community newsletter, no longer an HOA pamphlet filled with reminders and threats, but something closer to a living scrapbook. She'd chosen a name, the Ridge Voice. Audra was approached by 2 elderly women in the back pew. Would she consider chairing the bylaw rewrite committee? Only if we're allowed to outlaw passive-aggressive lawn signs, she said with a grin. At dusk, families gathered by the shed. String lights looped between pine branches, flickering like tiny stars. Someone had set up a small table with cider and a tin box of gingerbread cookies. A little girl hung a paper dove on the shed door. Her brother followed, tying a piece of tinsel to the handle. One by one, neighbors added ornaments, each small, each sincere. It became more than a structure. It became a season's centerpiece, a token of reclaimed dignity. Jenny's article had just appeared in the state paper. Its headline stretched bold across the fold: "The Shed That Dismantled a Tyrant." A photo showed Howard, standing by the open door, one hand resting lightly on the frame. He hadn't smiled in the picture, but the eyes said enough. That night, Howard stepped into the shed for a moment of quiet. He placed Martha's old thermos, brushed clean, polished, on the windowsill beside the ribbon. Then he tied the ribbon to the window latch, double-knotted. His fingers lingered there, cold but steady. Outside, the town hummed. Carolers wandered house to house. A string of lights blinked softly across the yard. The wind was light, the kind that carried music a little farther. As Howard walked away, he saw a new neighbor moving in, smiles and says, "You'll like it here. Just watch out for committees." The first snow had barely settled when the last violation notice was taken down, replaced by laughter, cider, and handmade ornaments on a once-contested shed. What began as one man's quiet act of remembrance became a community's reckoning with rules that forgot their people. When power stops listening, even a rusty nail in a backyard wall can become a rallying cry. Perhaps it's never too late to join hands with neighbors, to speak kindly, but firmly, against injustice. Like Martha's violet ribbon fluttering in the window, some legacies don't just endure, they guide others home.